Hello, everybody. So today's case is coming out of Hawaii, and it is going to involve a lot of disturbing details that pertains to a child. The details are not good. So this is a trigger warning to kind of back out of the video if this is not something that you can handle. I totally understand. But what happened to Peter is it's gross. So I'm just going to give you a heads up right now that it's absolutely horrifying and this might not be the video for you. That being said, this is the first video of the new year. I hope you guys had a nice New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. But now it's time to get started on some new cases. And I wanted to start off with Peter's. Because what happened to him was... It's mind-boggling that the things that parents can do to their children. It's horrifying and mind-boggling that this even happened. He looked like such a sweet little boy, and you know what? You'll just see when we get into it. So, like I said, this case is coming out of Hawaii, and I think it's the first case I've done out of Hawaii. So, Peter was born to parents Peter Kema Sr. and Jalen Marine Akol Kema on May 1st, 1991. So, he was 6 years old when this would happen to him. And his short little life was filled with abuse, pain, cruelty, just a very hard life. Not long after he was born, CPS would become involved with the Kema family after a family member made a report. Peter, just a baby, had a broken arm and leg along with healed fractures. His siblings also suffered multiple injuries at the hands of their parents. Peter was then placed with his grandparents, James and Yolanda Akol. In 1995, when he was just 4, Peter would be placed back into his parents' custody, despite the evidence of all the injuries he's had and but I would say is very obvious abuse. And this really pissed me off. I mean, I don't think CPS is known for their amazing work. They care about children. I feel like, at least where I'm from, in a lot of cases around here, CPS is quite known for tearing families apart. They don't actually look into cases of abuse. And quite frankly, they don't help children from where I'm from. So I think it's like pretty well known, or at least in a lot of people's heads, that CPS isn't the best at what they do. So if you're a CPS worker, I'm sorry. I'm just saying, like, that is like, for most people, I feel like that is the perceived idea of CPS, because they could always do better, and somehow they always seem to fall short. And I definitely feel it in this case. So one report says that he suffered a spiral fracture, which can only occur when the limb is twisted until the breaking point. That definitely sounds like abuse to me. So James and Yolanda actually filed multiple reports, but CPS failed to act. Like I was just talking about, they failed to really do their jobs if they're supposed to. Peter Sr. and Jalen were determined to keep them away from their grandkids, and when they did see them, they described them as looking frail and injured. According to reports and testimony from his siblings, Peter once sustained a wound so deep, quote, that someone could put a finger inside it, end quote. When I read that, it gave me chills. Children don't just get injuries like that. Do they get injuries? Oh yeah, all the time. Children are quite rambunctious. But to the point when they get a wound so deep that you can stick a finger inside it, at the very least, that is neglect. That is disturbing. So James and Yolanda fought for custody, but the court sided with Peter and Jalen for some fucking reason. But we also know that in a lot of cases, the courts don't always do their job either. In fact, I feel like most of the time they don't do their job. James and Yolanda saw Peter for the last time in 1996. In 1997, the family moved out of their home to get away from CPS. There wasn't much outside intervention, Peter was in kindergarten, and his absence caused him to be removed from the system. And that helped his parents to get away with abuse even more so. When Peter was in the hospital in 1991, so we're going back to 1991, CPS had ordered a psych eval on his parents, and it was reported that they, quote, had potential for abusive parenting, end quote. So, the psych eval was done on his parents. It literally said they have the potential to do this, and CPS still failed to do their job, failed to keep Peter away from his parents. He was in a loving home with James and Yolanda, and they put him back with the people who have the potential for abusive parenting. That is the biggest fumble I could fucking think of. It's right in front of their faces, and they're just not doing their job. So, one worker even mentioned that Peter Sr. had explosive anger, but nothing was done to save the children. Nothing. And it is so disgusting. So, if you have not backed out of the video already, I'm going to give you another trigger warning. Because right now, I am going to give you just a little bit, just the tiniest bit of some of the stuff that Peter went through. And, oh my god, it's horrific. So, this is your chance to back up. But just some of the torture that he went through, because it was torture. He was shot with a BB gun. Don't forget, he's between the ages of being a very young baby to 6 years old, because he only lived to be about 6, that we know of. So he was shot with a BB gun, thrown out of a window, forced to eat dog feces, and made to sleep outside without a mattress or blanket. Outside, without a mattress or blanket. Even more things happened to him, but they are way too graphic to even mention. Like, that is how bad things were for him. And when I was reading all the stuff he went through, it kind of reminded me of the Gabriel Fernandez case. The abuse would end on April 26, 1998, when Jalen filed a missing persons report for Peter Jr. She told Hilo Police Department that she hadn't seen her son since August 1997, when Peter Jr. and Peter Sr. left Hilo for Honolulu. So I think it's super weird that as a mother, you don't see your child for almost a year, and then you finally file a missing persons report. That is super weird. And I think it's quite obvious that she waited some time to do this, to maybe help her husband get away with some things. So later on, Peter Sr. Said he took his son, Peter Jr., to Honolulu while looking for employment. The two of them lived in a tent in I'm sorry if I pronounce this wrong, Ayala Park, but Peter Sr. had, quote, another arrangement in mind. And this is where we kind of start getting discrepancies. So Peter Sr. told Hawaii County Police Department that on August 11th, 1997, he signed over custody of Peter Jr. to Rose Makawa. I'm sorry. Let me take a pause and then come back with the name so I don't butcher this. Okay, I believe I have the name, and I believe it's pronounced Rose Makawakani. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. It was better than what I was about to say, so I wanted to try to get it right. And supposedly this Rose was a family friend, and he called her auntie. They agreed to exchange custody of Peter, as the Kemas could no longer afford to provide for him. However, the signed agreement he produced was dated September 11th, 1997, and not August, so there's a month gap. So, what happened to Peter? Where was he? Where is he? So, the police definitely knew that the story was suspicious, but they didn't really have any evidence. So, it was a year after he was reported missing that his other siblings were removed from their parents' care after there were even more allegations of physical and sexual abuse. So, police would continue to press the parents for Rose's contact information or even address, but they couldn't provide it. This family friend that you trust so much to take custody of your child, but you do not have contact information or address information. You don't have a phone number, an email, where they live. I don't know about you, but even if I could not provide for my child, I'm not going to let them go to someone who I have no information on. Where they live, a phone number, anything. To me, that's just super weird. And as someone who is supposed to be a family friend, that's a little odd. There was also no government documents by anyone of that name, of Rose's name. So Peter's siblings, Lena, Chantel, and Alan, were interviewed by police in the wake of his disappearance, and they gave disturbing information. Lena, who was 4 when Peter disappeared, said she'd seen Peter chained and thrown into a bin. Later, she saw his lifeless body being placed into a box and taken to Honolulu. And, due to her age, police didn't really take much stock in it, but they did believe that Peter Jr. did not arrive to Honolulu alive, and I have to agree. Obviously, because of her age, kids see certain things and it's not always as they are. Um, but it doesn't make it less disturbing to know that she saw her brother in some sort of state that wasn't right and she remembered it. And I have to agree with, all the information we have on the parents and the abuse. I also agree that he did not go to a Honolulu alive. Peter Sr. said Rose was a Lahala weaver and frequently sold hats in the park during the weekend for $5 each. He also claimed she was a cousin from his stepdad's family and a longtime friend, although he hadn't seen her since 1982. So, someone you have not seen in well over a decade at this point, you don't have any contact information, you don't have an address for, you just sign over your custody to this person of your child, your beautiful young child. So, for one thing, have not seen them in at least 10 years. Okay, so how do you suddenly know where they are to get them to sign over custody? You just run into them one day and are like, hey, I can't take care of my child. Will you take them? And you don't get an address, a phone number, nothing. It's a little weird. Like, the math ain't mathing. It's just a little weird. So he described Rose as a 47-year-old, and this was in 1997. She was 47 years old, 5'0" to 5'1", with a husky build, unbrushed curly salt and pepper hair, and brown eyes. He said she is of Hawaiian, Japanese, and Portuguese descent, with a fair complexion. He said she normally wore floral print shirts and shorts or pants with an elastic waist. He said that she was planning on moving to a beach community in Florida at the time he gave her his son. I just feel like that's a lot of unnecessary detail into this woman. You're remembering what she normally wore. Someone who you've not seen in over 10 years, you suddenly have seen again. Suddenly you know what she wears all the time. It's just a little bit weird. And I just feel like that's just a weird detail, is like the kind of clothes she wears normally. It wouldn't be weird to remember maybe what she was wearing the last time you saw her, but to say this is normally what she wears when you haven't seen her in like 10 years, definitely weird, at least to me. So, although he claimed that she was a longtime family friend, his relatives said that they never heard of her prior to 1997. So I think right there, it's pretty obvious this Rose person does not exist. And even if she did exist, they don't know about her. And I kind of think he fabricated this little story of having a family friend to try to make her more believable. But the thing is, if you call someone a family friend, you should probably be prepared for the family to be asked about this person, you know? Just a little weird to me. But I think that's kind of pretty obvious now. There is no Rose. Peter Jr. probably did not arrive to Honolulu alive. To me, at least, it's obvious. So, Hawaii does have a history of unofficial adoptions, referred to as hanai. In the hanai tradition, the biological parents turn over custody of a child to a blood relative. The parents continue to have regular contact and visitations with the child after this and remain a central part of their child's life. Many people familiar with the tradition have said that the Kema situation does not classify as such an arrangement. In 2005, Allen, who was then an adult, gave an interview with the media and gave recollections of when Peter disappeared. He said he and Chantel were outside their home when they heard a commotion inside the house. They were afraid to go inside and see what happened. Later that day, Peter Sr. told them that Peter Jr. was gone and instructed them that if anyone asked, they were to say that Peter Jr. was living with relatives in Oahu. Lena, in 2007, said she remembered the last time she saw him, he was unconscious and his mom was crying and attempting mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. In 2016, Jalen and Peter Sr. were arrested and charged in his disappearance. The indictment's statements say that police believe Peter passed away due to failure to seek medical care. And CBS reported that the family had health insurance, but Jalen didn't take him to a hospital because she feared Peter Sr., so she feared her husband, basically. Indictments also noted that Peter likely succumbed to septic shock. Jalen was sentenced to serve 1 year with credit for time served in exchange for her testimony account against Peter Sr. Jalen would pass away in 2019. Peter Sr. sentenced to 20 years in prison. Courts have offered him a deal where he will serve a minimum of 6 years if he leads police to Peter's body. Over the years, he has given plenty of conflicting statements, and his version of events has changed a lot. He told investigators that he threw his ashes into the ocean on the Puna Coast Highway 137, close to McKenzie State Park. Multiple searches have come up empty-handed, and police fear that they will likely never find out the actual truth of what happened to Peter. So Peter is still considered missing because his remains have never been retrieved. If you have any information, you're urged to contact Captain Greg Esteban of the Hawaiian Police Department at 808-935-3311, and the case number is F48921. And that is what I have for you guys on the case of Peter Kema. So, what do I think happened? I feel like Peter, whether, maybe he did something to upset the parents or they were just being their usual abusive selves. I think one or both of the parents were abusing him, and it was taken way too far to the point where he was knocked unconscious or killed instantly, and I think they needed to cover up. So I think they told their children, don't tell anybody what happens, and then the father, Peter Sr., I think he put his child into a box. I think he escaped to Honolulu, where he hid out for a while, disposed of the body somehow, and I think the mom waited a year to say anything, probably to try to let the body decompose or, evidence to not be found. And I think when the time came and they had to talk about it, their stories weren't lined up. They made up this fake family friend that at least in my opinion, was later on proved to not be a real person. And, they eventually went to prison for this. And I do think that they killed their child in 1997. And I think he was dead before he even reached Honolulu. Honestly, he might not even be in Honolulu. Honolulu could have just been a cover-up to make the police search there. He could be literally anywhere else in Hawaii. But I do think he died that day when there was a commotion in the house, and his siblings were too scared to go and see. When they said, he's gone, say he's living here, I think when they said he's gone, as in he's actually dead. That is what I think happened. And I think maybe Jalen, although she was a horrible human being, she probably did not expect her son to die. And he was trying to give him mouth to mouth, like Lena said she saw her doing, because she was scared for her own skin, not necessarily for her son. And when that didn't work, he was taken away in a box. And that is what Lena saw. So that is my opinion on what happened. Leave your thoughts down below, but please be respectful because this is a child. But please let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for listening to Peter's story. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And I hope one day his remains can be found so that he can be properly laid to rest. Thank you so much for listening to a story again, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.